Chalkworks, guys. Today on the channel we're going to be working on my Jeep. I've been putting money into this thing for a long time, and I never really had too many issues with the charging system or starting or anything like that until probably about a year ago. I kept having this issue where after I did all the wiring in the Jeep, redid the dash, changed everything over from analog to digital. And ever since then, I've had this problem where I would go to get gas or something, I'd go to get a coffee or whatever, and I'd go to fire the Jeep back up, and it would be really hard to start. Normally, that's a heat soak issue where your starter solenoid gets too hot and it won't start up. I didn't think it was that at first because sometimes the Jeep would be sitting for like a week, and I would go out to start it up and take off to take it to work or something like that, and it wouldn't fire it up at all. It'd be dead. The battery would just be 100% donezo. So I had a draw in the system somewhere that was draining my battery while it sat. So I didn't have a lot of time for it just because of, everything around my house and family stuff. So every once in a while I'd get to it and I'd come out and I'd tinker on it. And the first thing I did, obviously, was I put a new battery in it because I thought, well, maybe I killed the battery too many times and it just won't hold a charge anymore. So I changed the battery in it. I did, that didn't do anything. It still had a slow drain that would kill this battery. So before I let that go any further, I'd either let the Jeep sit on a trickle charger while I wasn't using it, or I would disconnect the battery completely when I wasn't driving the Jeep. I mean, it still didn't solve my issue, but it was solving it at the time. But I noticed that even when I would hook it back up, that I was still having the same problems. I would go drive it around, and when I would go to start it back up and take off, it would be really slow to start when it was hot. You'd let it sit for a while, it'd come back. That's usually a heat soak issue. But I wanted to check, I wanted to update everything else in the meantime. I still had a slow draw off the battery. So I wasn't 100% positive it was the starter because I had never really had issues with the starter before. I did all the stuff, and so I wasn't convinced that it was that. So I did the big 3 update on it, changed all the wiring out to 0 gauge on it. That didn't do anything. I checked the alternator, put a multimeter on everything. I was getting plenty of, amps from my alternator, and I was getting 14 volts at the battery. So that's good. It was charging the battery no problem when it was running. So I could have spent some time with a multimeter and gone to the fuse box and, checked every fuse and every lead and looked for something that was, that was actually pulling power. But I wanted to put a kill switch on it anyway. That's what I ended up doing. I ended up bypassing the whole, fuse box and everything and putting a kill switch in line. That way, you just flip a switch, power off, no pull to the battery. When you go to, use it, you just flip your, master switch back on, battery power, good to go. Well, I was still having the same issue, so that's when I came to the conclusion that, okay, I got a bad starter. Well, so I pulled the starter out, replaced it with a mini high torque starter, and, that thing works amazing, but I was still having the problem. So I was like, okay, I've narrowed everything down. I've pretty much crossed the T on every other piece that it could be. It has to be heat soak. So I pulled the headers off. I decided I was going to wrap the headers, and I was debating on whether I would use a heat shield or a heat blanket around the starter. I'm literally trying to get all of the heat, as much heat away from the starter solenoid as possible, and hopefully this will solve my problem. I've spent the time, I wrapped the headers. I didn't film any of that. If you ever want to see like how to wrap headers or something, there's tons of YouTube videos on it. So I wrapped the headers, painted the headers. I had some cracks in my headers. I had to weld those up. So I got the headers all sorted and they're ready to go back in. And I figured I'd do an oil change at the same time. I have an oil leak off the pan, so the pan's off of it. And so I was debating on whether I was going to go with a heat blanket or a heat shield. Now, a lot of guys, the theory is that, or what a lot of guys think, is that the heat blanket actually, because it's wrapped at the starter, it actually holds heat onto the starter. I don't believe that. I believe it deflects a lot of heat, you know, coming from your headers and from the engine and stuff like that. It's going to deflect most of that. But heat soak is heat soak, and if your starter does get hot after, it might help you in the short term if you're going short distances. But if you're running that thing all day and heat is just hitting the blanket and it's getting hot and it's on your starter and there's no airflow in there, it's going to hold heat to your starter, and your starter won't be able to dispel heat because you've got this, you know, heat blanket wrapped around it. You know, I mean, obviously, everybody goes to bed, you wrap yourself up in a blanket and you get hot. Keeping the covers on you are not going to cool you down, you know. So I went the route of getting a heat shield for it, and that way there's an air gap between the heat shield and the starter, and air will be able to get in there and, you know, flow around my starter and cool it down, and it obviously won't hold the heat to the starter. So today I'm literally just going to put the Jeep back together. I'm going to start it up. I'm going to get, you know, my probe out, and I'm going to probe the starter and see how hot it's actually getting. I'm going to shut it down after it gets pretty much to the highest heat that it's going to get, and see if it'll fire back up. Alright guys, well my battery died, but I'll catch you up to speed on what I've got done on the Jeep. I did get the header on. I got the starter up in there. I ended up pulling the starter back out with the wrap that's on the header now. The heat shield was actually hitting the header, so I ended up pulling it back off there. I ended up having to go down to the auto parts store, get a different starter cable. Anyway, I'll get you guys under there so you can actually see what it looks like. Alright guys, now I have you under here with my starter. Before this was clocked in a way, the solenoid was pretty much up towards the header. Obviously I was able to clock this 180 degrees. The heat shield originally went around this side, and I still wanted to use the heat shield, but obviously it was just gonna like clear for the pan. So I reworked the heat shield so that I could, you know, it would still be deflecting away from the exhaust here, you know, or at least heat coming down onto it. All right, guys, I didn't like the way that wire looked, so I actually rerouted it here. Also, you can see, originally these had like little lock washers on them, and normally, obviously, those wouldn't be Allen head. When I put the motor in, I bought a whole stainless steel bolt kit for it, and they came with these nice Allen heads. I wanted to maximize, like, you know, the surface area for my oil pan to give the best chance of sealing. So I put some stainless steel washers on all those that were bigger. This gasket sat for 24 hours before I went ahead and pulled each bolt individually, put a washer on it, and tightened them down to spec. You know, hopefully I won't get any leaks. 4-piece gaskets are kind of a pain in the ass, and every one that I've ever put on has leaked. So hopefully I won't get any leaks. Normally it leaks right out of the rear seal and gets all over my freaking flywheel and just spits all over the bottom of the Jeep. Hopefully I solved that issue this time. If not, the next time I do an oil change on it, I'll try it again. It's not that bad. It's a little tedious to change out the gasket, but you know, I'll perfect the art of putting on a gasket for an AMC 401. So anyway, I will take you guys back up top and we'll get that next header installed, get the firing order set back up, plugs all hooked back up, and yeah, hopefully by that time I'll have another exhaust donut and you guys can hear this thing fire up. These Remflex gaskets are like 36 bucks, but they're really worth it. If you're running headers, these things are like full graphite and they literally squish like 50%. No need to retighten your header bolts. I've gone through a lot of different gaskets. I've tried a bunch of different gaskets with headers. These ones are literally the best ones I've ever run. I've never had any leaking issues with them or blowing out. I think they're good up to like 3,000 degrees. Really good. So don't cheap out and buy like, you know, crappy gaskets or 3-piece gaskets. Get on Jegs, get on Summit, and find yourself a pair of Remflex if they're available for your vehicle. And you will not be disappointed. You just gotta be really careful with them when you put them in, that you don't like crack them or like bend them in half or anything like that. You'll break up the graphite and they won't seal as good. But just gotta be a little careful with them. Alright guys, welcome back. So I got the parts for the Jeep. The exhaust parts came in. I got it all hooked up. The oil's been checked, topped that off. Pretty much ready to start the Jeep. Make sure I have oil pressure. You know, burn off all the shit off the headers and see if my my fix worked. You know, I'll let it run, let it get up to temperature, and then probably, you know, shut it down and then let it sit for like a minute or 2 minutes, like if I'm running into the store, and then try and start it back up and see if I still have the same issues. I'll probably do that a couple times this week and give you guys an update, because in the past when I've done this, or well, when I've tried to fix the issue in the past, it hasn't like shown up right away. Like it usually takes a good heat soak on it, but I figure if I run the rig for like 10 minutes, you know, I should have like ample temperature on it. I'll probably bring the probe out and check it with the probe, and we'll see what temperatures I'm actually getting at the starter. I should have probably done a test like prior to see how hot my starter was actually getting, so I could see like what temperature it was and how much like temperature loss I'm actually getting from like rotating it down, putting the heat wrap on there and the heat shield. But I think I pretty much attacked it like from every angle I possibly can, and I don't think if I still have the same problem, it's not a heat soak issue. It's got to be something else. Anyway, let's fire it up and burn off all the shit. Oil pressure sitting at 60. Oil pressure sitting at 60, but it'll probably drop down once it gets warmed up. I just want to check my bolts. Getting 14.4 volts. So that's really good. You can see all the smoke coming off the headers. I have to turn the fan on. Kick the fan on, that'll blow some of this smoke out of here. Smoke coming out the headers. I painted them pretty good, so it's going to be a little bit before all that freaking burns off. Yeah, Jeep's sitting right at 60. Man, she sounds good. My shop's kind of a disaster right now. Doesn't look like I have any oil leaks. Yeah, no oil leaks yet. Hopefully, at all. Yeah, that stinks. fan's kicking on. Fan's on and only dropped 0.2 volts. Well, we'll let her get up to temperature, and then I'll shut it down and see if she fires back up. All right, let's shut her down and see if she fires back up. Well, in a minute we'll know we'll have our moment of truth. All right, well, let's fire it back up and see if it'll start. See if we still have a problem. But she definitely doesn't seem like she's having the problem anymore. We'll see down the road. I'll give you guys an update, another video on, whether the problem came back. It sounds like my starter might be hanging up a little bit on the flywheel. I am super happy. Normally, it would not start like that. So it seems like for now that I've fixed my problem. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I have a Facebook link now down below if you guys want to check that out. I'd love to see like your guys' projects, what you're working on. I hope you enjoyed something a little different than, the truck. The channel's not, really about diesels. I do love diesels, but I have a lot of other stuff, that I work on. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys have a great week. Social media down below, comment on the video. Tell me what you guys think. If you'd like to see more of this or what you'd like to see in the future from the channel. I have an old 8274 winch that I want to do like a video on, like a full restoration on it, like powder coating it, replacing all the parts, and making it really nice and putting it on here. If you guys are interested in a video like that, let me know. Anyways, comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.